Welcome to GeorgeWay Math TV.
So how I'm asked to simplify these square roots or the radicals right here. So square root of 128. So I know the first thing that I'm going to do is try to find that square root of 128. I got a decimal. Anytime I get a decimal, I know I have to then look for two numbers that if I multiply, I should get this 128. One of the numbers should be a perfect square. So because I had a decimal, that means I have to know all my perfect squares. So I'm going to have to create something here. So to figure out my perfect squares is easy. I'm just going to put 2 up to 10. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're gonna create our perfect square right now. I know I got this right here. So these will be my perfect squares. I just do 2 times 2 is 4. So that means 4 is a perfect square. Because square root of 4 is 2. And that one too, to figure out the perfect square, I do 3 times 3 is 9. So square root of 9 is 3. And then to figure this out, I do 4 times 4 is 16. So square root of 16 is 4. And then I do that one, 5 times 5 is 25. So that means square root of 25 is 5. And then I do it for 6. 6 times 6 is 36. So that means square root of 36 is 6. And I do 7 times 7, I have 49. So that means square root of 49 is 7. Then I do 8 times 8 is 64. That means square root of 64 is 8. Then I do 9 times 9 is 81. So that means square root of 81 is 9. And I do 10 times 10 is 100. So that means square root of 100 is 10. So again, you see how I put 2 to 10 right there. I multiply this by itself 2 times to get these right here. And you do that for square roots. And that's how I'm able to know my perfect squares. Or I'm able to remind myself what my perfect squares are. So these will be my perfect squares. So I know I always have to do this real quick. And the more I do it, I'll be able to master it. So I don't even have to do this a lot. But this is how I figure it out. So anytime I'm finding the square root of any number that I'm being given, and it gives me a decimal, because I'm going to need two numbers that if I multiply, I should get this number. And one of the numbers should be a perfect square. That's why I have to know these right here. Create this one right here. So I remind myself what my perfect squares are. And now it's easy. Because now this is what I'm going to do. I pick it. So if I get a square, I get a decimal. I pick this number. I take this number. And then I start from the bottom. The bottom perfect square. So now this number right here is 128, right? So I'm looking for the two numbers. If I multiply, I should get 128. One of them should be a perfect square. So I take the 128 divided by the last perfect square right there, 100. And I had a decimal. So that means it's not going to work. I should get a whole number. So I move on to 81. So 128 divided by 81. I still got a decimal. So that means I'm going to move on to 64. And I got 2. So 64 worked. Again, I did 128. When I reached 64, or 128 divided by 64, I had 2. Which actually tells me that 2 times 64 is 128. So now, I'm going to have to do this. The 128 is the same as 64 times 2. And the 64 should be able to be broken down. The 64 and the 2 should be broken down to 2, which is square root of 64 times square root of what? 2. And square root of 64 is 8. So I have 8 and then the square root of 2. So that would be my answer right there, 8 square root of 2. Same thing for this one. First thing that I'll do if I'm asked to simplify is put it in the calculator. So square root of 200. And I have a decimal. And anytime that gives me a decimal, then I have to think of finding the two numbers that when I multiply, I should get this 200. One of them should be a perfect square. And these are my perfect squares. And I have to start from the bottom right here. So I'm doing 200 divided by the last perfect square right there, divided by 100. And that just gave me 2. So that tells me, again, that 200 divided by 100, if it's 2, then 2 times 100 is 200. So the two numbers that I can use is 100 times 2. And I break this down to 2. So square root of 100 times square root of 2. And square root of 100 is what? It's 10. So I put down the 10, and then square root of 2, there's nothing we can do with that. It's not a perfect square, so we just bring that down. So 10 square root of 2 will be my answer. Oh, that's not bad. So always put it in the calculator first. If I get a decimal, then I'm going to look for two numbers. Then if I multiply, I should get this number. One of them should be a perfect square. And creating my perfect square like I did on the side is going to really help me, because I take that number and divide, start from the bottom, perfect square, and keep dividing until I find it. And once I find it, that tells me the number that I divided by times my answer is the number inside the radical. So these two numbers is what I will use, and I break it down like that. I think I'm going to remember. I really like this. Now let's move on to the next one. Now, for these two right here, and of course other ones, I want you to practice it, so you can make sure you really got this. And I know you got it. So whenever you've been asked to simplify a radical or a square root, right? First, check to see if it's a perfect square. And if it's not a perfect square, look for two numbers that if you multiply, you get the radical. But one of the numbers should be a perfect square. Please, I want you to write this down if you have to. It could be very helpful to you. But again, I'm saying check to see if it's a perfect square. And what are perfect squares? Let's refresh our mind a little bit. Perfect squares are numbers like 4 is a perfect square, because square root of 4 is 2. Because square root means you're looking for a number. When you multiply by itself 2 times, you should get the number inside the radical. And square root of 4 is 2. It makes sense, because 2 times 2 is 4. 9 is a perfect square, because square root of 9.
Please don't forget to subscribe, tap the bell to be notified for new videos, and share.